Hello beautiful, my name's Mina. In 2024, I read 60 books, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10. 2024 was a really strange reading year for me. I didn't read quite as many books as I usually do. I started my first big girl job after graduating from college, and so I haven't had as much time and energy for reading, but I do still absolutely love it, and I do really in 2025 want to get back into making videos more consistently on my channel. So I hope that if you're new here, you'll subscribe, and if you've been here a long time, you'll know that I love and appreciate you for sticking around through the kind of sporadic uploading that has been going on in 2024. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that things will work out for 2025 to be a more consistent and plentiful content year. So without further ado, let's get into the top 10 books that I read in 2024. So we're going to start at number 10 and count our way down to my number 1 read of the year. And so in the number 10 spot, we have Nevada by Imogen Benny. This is a story about a woman named Maria. She's a trans woman living in New York. She is in a long-term relationship with her girlfriend Steph. And this is kind of about Maria self-reflecting on how unhappy she is in her life, how stuck she feels. It's a reflection on gender, on relationships, also on selfishness and perspective. And we see that Maria is a very complicated woman, and she kind of decides to implode her life. And this is about her being very messy, very imperfect, and in all her imperfection trying to become a mentor to a younger queer person. She, on her journey, meets a young man named James. Maria kind of sees something in him that speaks to who she once was as a younger person. This book was so interesting because, like I said, Maria is a very imperfect protagonist, and it was very compelling, particularly as Maria being someone who is much further along in her journey as a queer person, as an out queer person, as an out trans woman. She's much further into her transition than this character James is. James is still figuring out if he may even be trans or not. And it's interesting because Maria is trying to guide him, but because she is so much further along in her journey, she is not sure how to convey all of her talking points correctly to him. And I don't know exactly how to describe it, but there was just really something very beautiful about this idea of queer intergenerational mentorship, this idea of imperfect women, people who make terrible choices but are still trying to be good people and still trying to connect and experience community in the way that Maria is. There was just something really interesting and impactful about that, and I have still been thinking about the book very frequently since then. It's a really short read as well, and it kind of leaves you on this ambiguous note that just made it feel so powerful and so interesting. So had to give it a spot on this list. It was very good. In the number 9 spot, we have Yield Under Great Persuasion by Alexandra Rowland, and this is a relatively short novel. It's a fantasy romance, and we're following this character named Tam Beckett, who lives in a small town, and he is kind of in a situationship, so to speak, with the lord of the town, Lord Lyford. But him and Lord Lyford, they have a sort of contentious relationship, and he doesn't actually like Lord Lyford, but he does enjoy relations with him. And this is a story about Tam being this really cantankerous and negative person, and sort of it's all about perspective, because Tam is kind of living under this delusion that him and Lyford are enemies, that everybody in the town hates him, that he has no community, he has no prospects, and everything is going wrong in his life. And in actuality, that's not the truth. That's his truth. That's the way that he feels, but that's not the way that things really truly are. And so it was a really great book about how life is more so about your perspective, because you are experiencing a lot of negative self-talk and you are criticizing yourself very heavily does not mean that that's the way the rest of the world sees you. And also, just because you struggle to express your emotions, that doesn't mean that you don't have them. That doesn't mean that people don't still love you and still want to connect with you. And I think that Tam was a very cool character, and you will sense a pattern with me. I love imperfect characters, and he was very imperfect. He was a jerk. He was a jerk. He was the kind of person you'd be like, I don't know if I would be friends with him. But I think that there was something very interesting and admirable about the fact that the author was able to make him someone that I really connected with so deeply, and I felt for him, and I loved him, and I was rooting for him, even though he was kind of an asshole. So huge shout out to Alexander Rowland for being able to write such a complex character. Such a fun story. It also has a really interesting world. It is, like I said, sort of a short book, but it has very interesting like magic and world building, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. And then the romance aspect is also very good, and it's just like somebody being loved even though they don't feel worthy of that love is so beautiful always to me. So I adored this, and yeah, I definitely would recommend you guys checking it out. All right, so in our number 8 spot, we have Anniebot by Sierra Greer. I read this book in the beginning of fall, and I just kind of have not been able to stop thinking about it because this is a AI story. This is about a sex robot named Anniebot. Has this owner, Doug, and this is about the relationship that she has with Doug as Doug continues tinkering around with her coding to make her more and more human for his own pleasure, and you know, for him to kind of play with her and have more fun interacting with her. But in so doing, she does begin to gain more autonomy, and she is becoming her own person. She's becoming a thinking individual, and I think that this book really delves into the complications of AI, the relationship between humans and technology, the importance of being an empathetic person when utilizing technology, because Doug is such like, he's such an evil person, and the way that his evil is explored is very interesting, but he is such like an evil and despicable individual in the way that he utilizes this technology. First of all, because he makes Annie appear like his ex, who he very much hates, and so in a way he is able to act out his fantasies on Annie about this ex, and like he's just such an insane misogynist, and it's very complicated and very grotesque. It's a very worthwhile speculative look at what the world will look like as AI technologies advance, and the ways in which people's autonomy will be violated, like Doug's ex, and the way that people will utilize this technology in not the greatest of ways, especially if we continue to attempt to make the technology as close to human as possible. Like, what are the potential ramifications of that? I will always love stories about that, and so this was a really great sci-fi book for me, and I really thought that Annie was a very interesting character. The way that her psyche was chronicled, and the way that you could truly sense her development through the way that the prose progresses throughout the novel. Obsessed. Really liked it. Would recommend, obviously. Okay, in the number 7 spot, we have The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This book it's everything that everyone says that it is. It is a very compelling, deeply detailed, and rich fantasy story. We're following a few different POVs. We're following Kaladin, who is this young soldier who has been sold into slavery. He has now become a bridgeman, which is kind of like the lowest, hardest worked slave in this army. And we also are following Dalinar, who is a general in this army, and we're seeing two very different perspectives of this war that the people are fighting against this other group of people called the Parshendi. We are also experiencing the perspective of a young woman named Shalyn, who is trying to finesse her way into high society so that she can provide for her family. And Shalyn is not my favorite POV, but she was very interesting, and I think that on all levels this story was just so fascinating. We get a lot of different interludes and interjections from other characters as well, who are also important, but those are like our main POVs. And Kaladin, one of my favorite characters of all time. Dalinar, he's really growing on me. Shalyn, I think that I will like her more as the series progresses, because she's very young, and I think that she just has a lot of growing and learning to do, and so as she does that, I think I will like her a lot more. But this book was just very good. Like, the prose was excellent. I think the world is really fascinating, and like I said, very rich and detailed, and it was just really good. It's everything that everyone says it is. I understand why Brandon Sanderson gets so much praise and so much hype, and I get it. I see the hype. I understand it. It was good. And this was a buddy read with my friend Mariam. She's great. She's great. Buddy reading it with her was great. I loved just kind of freaking out over text about all of the little moments and all the big moments and how much we loved Kaladin together. So this was a really great reading experience for me. So, number 6, we have Post-Traumatic by Chantel V. Johnson. This is a story about a 30-year-old lawyer named Vivian who is going through it. As you can kind of guess by the title, Vivian does have post-traumatic stress disorder, and she is kind of dealing with the ramifications of allowing her traumas to go unaddressed for many years, and so it begins to come out and inform her life, particularly her dating life, and also to inform this growing sense of paranoia that she is experiencing in her everyday life. And I really love the way that this book tackles the ways in which young Black women are treated when they are experiencing abuse. A lot of times they are made to just sort of suck it up and intellectualize their trauma, and they are not encouraged to work through it. And I think that it was something that this book explored in a very interesting and nuanced way. And Vivian was a very complex person. Like I said, I love a complex person. She was very complex. There were so many moments where I just kind of wanted to grab her and shake her, but there were other moments where I just wanted to hug her and give her the support and the love that she so clearly and desperately needed. And it was just a really great reading experience. This was a buddy read with my friend Jen over at Everything She Reads. I will leave a link to her Instagram in the description below, but she's a great reviewer. She has amazing taste, and it was very fun buddy reading this with her. So yeah, but this was a really amazing reading experience, and definitely something that I have been thinking about all year long. I believe I read this one in February, and I still kind of can't stop thinking about it. I feel like it's something that I will definitely reread in the future, and I will be absolutely reading whatever Chantel V. Johnson puts out next. Okay, number 5 spot, we have Howl for the Gargoyle by Catherine Moon. Catherine Moon is one of my favorite monster romance authors. She just gets it. And I think that as much as like monster romance and paranormal romance is sort of not treated as a very serious genre, I think that this book exemplified everything that I enjoy about monster romance and paranormal romance, and what monster romances can explore through the metaphor of monstrosity and otherness, and I really, really love that. So this is a paranormal story in which humans and monsters live side by side, and mostly they live in harmony. But our main protagonist, Hannah, prior to the events of the story, has been attacked by a werewolf, and so she has now transformed into a werewolf herself, and she's leaving her human life behind. And with her transformation into a werewolf, she's experiencing a lot of different bodily changes, and she's also experiencing just the trauma of the attack itself and the PTSD from that, and also a sense of disconnection from herself because she is having to grapple with her extreme change in identity and a feeling of disconnection from her body, and she just doesn't understand herself in the same way that she used to when she was still human. So this book is about her finding a monster escort. He's a gargoyle, and they end up pursuing a sexual relationship with each other because one of the changes to her body as a werewolf is that she has a lot of urges around the full moon. And so this is an erotic story. This is an erotic monster romance, and so it does deal a lot very heavily with their sexy times, and their sexy times were very fun and exciting to read. But I think that one of the things that I really appreciated so much about this book, and that made it stick out for me so much in my mind, is the fact that I love the way that Hannah's trauma was handled. And this book is really about like reconnecting to your body in the aftermath of a trauma like that. And I think that this book just really does a beautiful job of that, in addition to the romance aspect just being very good, and it was very steamy. And I think that every element of this book just worked for me, so I loved it. If you are a monster romance person and you have not read this, you really should. I thought that it was very excellent. So yeah. In the number 4 spot, we have Evocation by S.T. Gibson. S.T. Gibson, I love you. You're a genius. I did experience a read by her this year that I didn't love that much. I read An Education in Malice, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought that I would, and it was actually such a like strong disappointment for me that I ended up rereading this book, which is a book I read in 2023. So I was like, I need to reread this. I need to reconnect with S.T. Gibson and make sure that we're still gang, because I thought that like maybe I had just hallucinated how good I thought this book was, and luckily I was wrong. This book is excellent, and it's everything that I love and want in like a paranormal fantasy romance kind of book. So this was everything that I wanted and I loved, and I'm so glad that I reread it because it re-solidified my love of S.T. Gibson. So Evocation is about this character named David. David is a warlock slash medium, and he is a part of this magical secret society, and he's also a lawyer. So on the side, he does this medium work, and he's doing some work for an older woman at the beginning of this story, and in so doing he starts to experience some of the symptoms of a curse. So he calls upon his ex-boyfriend Reese, who is also a member of this magical secret society that he's in, to help him figure out how to break this curse. The only catch is that Reese is married, and David does still have some feelings for Reese, and maybe Reese still has some feelings for David. And then there's also Reese's wife, who Reese is deeply in love with, named Moira. So this is a story about how they all come together as a triad. This is not a story about cheating, but this is a story about how they all come together as a triad in a romantic, platonic, and also magical sense to sort of figure out this magical mystery and help save David from this curse that is kind of overtaking him. I absolutely love the way that the magic worked in this, because they all have different forms of magic. Like David's magic is more innate to him. Moira's magic, she is a black, like, southern witch, and so her magic and her magical practice is different than the kind of magic that Reese practices, which is more like Latin incantations and intricate spell work and things like that. And I felt like the combination of all the different types of magic was very cool. But also I really loved the relationships in this and how it explored a second chance romance between Reese and David, but it also explores this really, really amazing, like, beautiful and budding love story between David and Moira, even though David is gay. So David is not interested in Moira in a sexual or romantic way, but they have like this beautiful, like, friendship, falling in love arc that was like so beautiful. It made me cry. There's this scene where David and Moira like have an argument, and when they have their moment of reconciliation, I cried. Like, their relationship was just so iconic and interesting to me, and I loved it so much. And S.T. Gibson's writing style is just very fun and approachable, and I really enjoyed the prose. It was just everything. Like, it was everything. I enjoyed it immensely, so I had to talk about it. I feel like not enough people talk about this book, but it's like probably one of my favorites of all time. Like, it's just too good. And this is a part of a series, which I didn't know when I first read it. I thought that it was just a standalone, but I am glad that it's a part of a series, and in 2025 the next book, Ascension, is coming out, and I'm very excited. Then in the number 3 spot, we have The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, another reread. Okay, so when I first read The Blade Itself in 2021, I believe, I gave it 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars because Joe Abercrombie, he really likes to take his time. And in this first book, we don't really get to the meat of the plot until the very end of the story. And so I remember just kind of feeling like, okay, it took too long. It took too long for us to get to our destination when I was reading it for the first time. But reading it for the second time, with all of the hindsight that I have of having read every book in the First Law series thus far, this is like one of the best introductions to a world I've ever read. It has an amazing cast of characters, the way that they interact with each other and the world, the way that Joe delivers information to you as a reader, fantastic. I absolutely adore his writing style, the dialogue, the sense of humor in it. I love how vulgar and violent and gory and intense it all is, and I just think that upon reread, like, this was a no-brainer 5-star, and I was so shocked by how much more I liked it on a second read. But I think it makes sense. Like I said, the hindsight of the rest of this series behind it makes it make more sense why Joe kind of decides to write the story in the way he does, and why he decides to pace the story the way he does. But it just worked. It just worked. It was so good, and it just, like, yeah, Joe Abercrombie is really up there. Favorite author of all time for sure. I always hesitate to give an author that, like, that stamp of approval until I have reread some of their books, just to see, like, does it hit the same the second time? And it did. In fact, it hit harder. So we love Joe Abercrombie. We stan. He is absolutely one of my top 3 favorite authors of all time, and he's not 3. All right, in the number 2 spot, we have Icarus by Kate Ancrum. And I am, of course, going to show off the fact that it's signed. We love it. We love it. It's signed. So anyway, Icarus is a YA story about a young art thief named Icarus. This is about how His crazy father has raised him to be an art thief, even though he should be focusing on making friends and graduating high school. And this is about him stealing from a rich man's house, and he ends up finding the rich man's son, who is locked up sort of like a prisoner in his own home. And the son's name is Helios. So this is a story about Icarus and Helios kind of forming a bond in a relationship and navigating the fact that they both have very crazy fathers. And as the story unfolds, we get a lot more information about the art theft, the backstories, the connectivity, and the faded nature of their relationship and connection between them. But this book is just so gorgeous. The writing is gorgeous. The characters are gorgeous. I absolutely love the relationship dynamic between Helios and Icarus. I am a true fan and stan of Kate Ancrum. I believe that her creative eye is just so fantastic, so singular, so unique, and I just absolutely adore her approach to writing and storytelling. And I just really love this. I really love the emphasis that Kate Ancrum always places on friendship and the importance of friends and community, as well as the beauty of a love story. And I feel like all of her books that I have read thus far feature kind of like a beautiful romantic connection, but also a really beautiful blossoming love between friends. And I just really love, like I said, the way that she showcases that beauty of community. And this was just a really great story. Like, it was a really great YA book. But even if you're not a young adult and you're not the target audience, I still think that it's a book that you could really love and enjoy, because it's just good. It's for everyone. The characters are just young, but it was very fantastic. Like, I can't stop thinking about it, and I have highlighted so many portions of this in my ebook copy of this, so I need to transfer my annotations and my highlights to this copy, but I'm very excited about it. And the very last book that I have to share with you guys, the #1 book of 2024 for me, is The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. So I adored this book deeply, you guys. It was so fantastic for me, and I haven't been spending as much time on BookTube and like on Book Talk, so I don't really know what the general consensus is for this, but this was absolutely the best romance of 2024, the best book obviously of 2024 for me personally. But I thought that this was such a fantastic second chance romance. So I love the second chance romance trope. If you don't know that about me, if you're new to the channel, I love it. Do I love it in real life? Would I actually give an ex a chance? Probably not, but fictionally, very, very fun. So this is a story about two characters, Kit and Theo, who have been childhood friends. They became lovers when they were in their early 20s, and then they have been broken up for a year at the time that the story starts. And so this is about them going on this trip that they were supposed to go on together, but the trip gets canceled, or so they think. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm gonna go anyway, even though I'm not gonna go with my partner. Only they both had the same idea. So they both end up on this European food and wine tour, and they are reconnecting after a year of no contact, after they had a really, really crazy blow up that it takes the story a long time to sort of reveal what they blew up over and why. So I won't reveal that to you. I want to say that this book and the way that it describes the food and the wine, it was so visceral. It felt so real, and it was just like so beautifully atmospheric. It made me want to go to Europe so bad. I was so immersed in the setting, and it very much felt like I was on my European like hot girl summer. It was just that good in terms of the writing style, the prose, and the atmosphere was just fantastic. But then the characters themselves, Kit and Theo, they were really interesting people. I really loved them. They were messy, horny bisexuals, and their relationship was crazy. The stuff that they're up to together and separately, crazy. I adored them deeply, and I feel like I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil some of the more shocking and like insane things that go on in this book, but I just really love this. Like, I really thought that the connection that Kit and Theo had was so beautiful. I thought that the way that their conflict was dealt with and the reasons for their conflict was very good. It felt real and honest, and I just really enjoyed it. I also found it very funny, very silly, very sexy. Like, it was just so, it just worked. It just worked. There was something about it that was so good and so perfect to me, and I really also enjoy the way that this book explores gender, because Theo is non-binary and has recently discovered their gender identity and has begun expressing their gender identity, and I really like the way that that theme was explored as well. I just loved it. I thought this was a really incredible, impactful, beautiful, sexy romance, and I would highly recommend it. So it's definitely easily my top read of the year, and I hope more people will read it in 2025 if they haven't already. So there we have it, gang, my best reads of 2024. So let me know what books you read in 2024 that you really loved, so I can add them to my 2025 TBR. Let me know if you're going to give any of these books a shot, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, you guys. Mwah.